turning the streets of Venice Beach into shimmering rivers of light. Most people ran for shelter, ducking into shops and huddling beneath awnings. But inside a small corner cafe, warmth wrapped itself around the room like a soft blanket. Candlelight flickered gently, casting golden shadows on wooden walls, and quiet jazz played from a dusty speaker near the counter. Emily sat alone by the window, sketchbook open, pencil dancing slowly across the page. The world outside blurred into streaks of gray and silver, but her eyes caught every detail, the way the raindrops raced down the glass, the glow of streetlights on the wet pavement, the lonely sway of a palm tree caught in the wind. She was a painter by soul, always watching the world in colors no one else noticed. The bell above the cafe door jingled as a gust of wind pushed it open. In walked a man, tall, soaked, the kind of soaked that told you he hadn't bothered with an umbrella. His dark leather jacket clung to him, water dripping from his hair. But his eyes, those steady, curious eyes, moved with purpose. He looked around the cafe, spotted the only empty seat near her, and without hesitation walked over. He nodded politely. "Mind if I sit here?" Emily looked up, meeting his gaze. Something about him was quiet but intense, like the storm had shaped him. She nodded. "It's warm here," she said simply. He ordered coffee, black, and took out a small notebook from his bag, but his eyes wandered to her sketchpad. "Are you drawing the rain?" She glanced at her sketch and smiled, brushing a curl behind her ear. "Trying to," she said. "I like the way it kisses everything it touches." That made him smile, too. "That's beautiful." And just like that, a thread wove itself between them. Not forced, not rushed, just something real. They began to talk about the weather, then about travel, art, old cities, books they'd loved, places they wanted to disappear into. The cafe faded into the background. The storm outside no longer mattered. Neither of them knew it yet, but something had begun, something soft, electric and impossible to ignore. The storm outside deepened, but inside the cafe, time seemed to slow. Ryan leaned forward, elbows resting on the worn wooden table, eyes fixed on Emily like he was trying to memorize every line of her face. Her sketchpad lay forgotten between them, her fingers now curled around a warm mug of tea. Their conversation flowed like a quiet river, easy, gentle, never forced. She told him how she moved to Venice Beach 3 years ago, leaving behind a structured life and a high-paying job in advertising. "I felt like I was living someone else's story," she said, voice soft, eyes distant. "I wanted to start over with something that made my soul feel alive." Ryan listened, fascinated. He shared his own journey, how he'd been a travel writer for almost a decade, chasing sunsets, cultures, and sometimes ghosts of memories he never fully understood. "I thought the world would fill me," he said. "But sometimes I still feel like something's missing." Emily looked at him then, really looked. "Maybe you weren't meant to find it in places," she whispered. "Maybe it's a person." There was a pause. Not awkward, not uncertain, just heavy with meaning neither of them dared name yet. She laughed then, breaking the tension. "Sorry, I sound like I read too much poetry." But Ryan shook his head. "No," he said. "It's the most honest thing I've heard in a long time." They shared stories that night, childhood fears, broken dreams, the things that made them cry when no one was watching. He told her about the letter from his mother he still carried in his wallet. She showed him a necklace her grandmother gave her, a silver locket with a dried flower inside. It wasn't just sharing, it was surrender. Slowly, piece by piece, they opened windows into parts of themselves they usually kept locked tight. The rain fell harder against the glass, thunder echoing in the distance, but inside that tiny cafe, it felt like the world had narrowed to just two souls who had collided without warning. They didn't know each other's last names yet, but somehow it already felt like they knew the most important parts. And as the hours slipped by unnoticed, neither wanted the moment to end. The cafe lights dimmed as the last song played, and the barista gently called out that they were closing. Emily looked at Ryan with a small, reluctant smile. Neither wanted to leave, but neither said it aloud. He stood, helping her into her light jacket. His fingers brushing her arm, warm, brief, electric. Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle, misty and quiet, as if the storm had finally exhaled. They stepped into the night, walking slowly along the damp sidewalk. The air was cool, the streetlights casting golden halos in puddles beneath their feet. Their shoulders brushed as they walked, and neither moved away. Venice Beach had fallen into a calm silence, broken only by the distant crash of waves and the soft hum of the city catching its breath. Her apartment was just a few blocks away, but every step felt like the world was shrinking around them, like time was bending to keep them inside this fragile, magical moment. They reached her gate, a low black iron frame with ivy curled along its edges. She paused there, her hand resting on it, hesitant to say goodbye. "This was," she began, but her voice trailed off. Ryan nodded, his eyes on hers. "I know." The rain touched them gently now, barely there, more like a memory than water. He stepped a little closer. "I don't want this night to end," he said, voice low and honest, cutting through the silence like a thread of warmth. Her breath caught, and for a moment she didn't answer. Then she looked up at him with eyes soft and glowing. "Then don't let it." That was all it took. He reached for her slowly, as if afraid the moment might disappear if he moved too fast. His hand found her waist, the other brushing the side of her face, thumb gently caressing her cheek. Her breath was trembling, but her eyes never left his, and then finally his lips met hers. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't shy. It was tender, deep, full of everything they hadn't said but had felt all night. Her fingers slid up his chest, finding the collar of his jacket, pulling him closer as the kiss deepened. Their hearts beat faster, pressed between them, bodies warming each other under the cool rain. The world blurred around them, no noise, no doubt, no fear. Just a kiss so honest, so electric, it made everything before it seem like a prelude. When they finally pulled back, her breath touched his lips. He rested his forehead against hers, both of them smiling without meaning to. And in that kiss, something had changed. Not just the night, but everything. They stood there for a moment longer, the mist curling around them like a blessing, their eyes locked in a silent agreement neither of them dared put into words. Emily turned the key in her gate and pushed it open, stepping backward toward the soft porch light that glowed above her door. Ryan followed without a word, and when she looked back over her shoulder, he was already watching her like he belonged there, like he'd always been meant to. Inside her apartment, the scent of vanilla candles lingered in the air. The space was small but warm, filled with paintbrushes, canvases, and books stacked in uneven towers. It felt lived in, real, like her. She closed the door behind them, the outside world falling away completely. The rain whispered against the windows now, softer than before, as if giving them privacy. Emily stood barefoot on the wooden floor, her wet dress clinging to her skin. Ryan's jacket was soaked through, so she stepped forward and helped him slip it off, her fingers brushing over his arms. They both paused, so close, breath mingling, energy building in the quiet space between them. He cupped her face again, gently, like he was afraid to rush something sacred. She leaned into his touch. Their lips met again, this time slower, deeper. Her hands slid up his chest, then around his neck, pulling him close. His arms wrapped around her waist, lifting her slightly as he kissed her harder, like he'd been waiting for her longer than tonight. They stumbled backward, laughing softly, hearts racing until she led him into her bedroom, where soft yellow light spilled in from the hallway. Clothes came off slowly, like pages turning in a story they both wanted to read carefully. He kissed the curve of her shoulder, the line of her collarbone, and down her spine. She traced his chest, his jaw, his lower lip with her thumb before kissing him again. They made love with unspoken promises. No rush, no script, just two souls learning each other's rhythm. Every touch said, "I see you." Every breath whispered, "Stay." Later, wrapped in her sheets, skin warm against skin, she lay with her head on his chest, drawing circles with her fingers. The storm had passed, but inside them, something still stirred, something new, electric, and infinite. In the quiet after, he kissed her temple and whispered, "I've never felt anything like this before." She looked up, eyes soft. Neither have I. And they didn't say anything else. They didn't have to. The morning light filtered gently through the sheer white curtains, painting golden stripes across the bed and the two tangled figures within it. Emily stirred first, her cheek pressed against Ryan's bare chest, rising and falling with the rhythm of his slow, steady breathing. For a moment she didn't move. She just listened to the quiet, to the calm, to the unfamiliar peace that had settled over her like a soft blanket. Outside, the sky was clear for the first time in hours. The storm had moved on, leaving only clean air and the scent of wet earth. Ryan blinked awake, his arm tightening slightly around her. His hand moved gently up and down her back as he whispered, "Morning." His voice was rough with sleep, warm and tender. Emily lifted her head and looked at him. No words, just a smile. A real one, unguarded. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face and letting his fingers linger on her cheek. "You're dangerous," he said softly, half smiling. She raised an eyebrow, teasing. "How so?" "Because I wasn't supposed to feel like this. Not this fast. Not this deep." Her smile faded into something more honest. "I know I feel it too." They lay there, facing each other, eyes open now to everything this meant. It wasn't just a one-night spark. It was a moment that cracked something open in both of them. Something they hadn't known was still alive. Ryan ran a finger down her arm, slow and thoughtful. "I've traveled everywhere trying to find something that felt like home," he said. "Turns out it might not be a place at all." Emily leaned in and kissed him, slow and lingering, her hand resting over his heart. "Maybe it's a person?" she whispered. He nodded, lips brushing against hers. "Maybe it's you." The clock ticked on, the world outside beginning to stir. But inside that apartment, time held its breath. They got up slowly, made coffee together in silence, touching between sips, smiling for no reason. The ordinary felt extraordinary because now it was shared. Ryan stood at the door with his bag in hand, but he didn't open it. He looked at her, barefoot in an oversized sweater, eyes still sleepy, and knew that leaving didn't feel right anymore. "You have plans today?" he asked. Emily shook her head, biting her lip. "I was hoping you'd stay." His smile answered for him. And just like that, what began with rain and coincidence had grown into something far more, a quiet, powerful promise that neither of them saw coming but now couldn't. Imagine walking away from,